Good afternoon, my name is Sean O'Brien, and I'm going to be telling you a little bit about how rock and roll influenced socialism in Eastern Europe. So this statement is already a bit strange. How did a form of music in the 50s and 60s affect this sprawling empire in Eastern Europe under the veil of communism? Well, I'll tell you about that as my speech goes. I'm going to be talking to you about how rock and roll was treated in socialist Eastern Europe, how it was spread, and the implications of it spreading. So, first of all, how it was treated. According to Vanillin Ganev, Western rock music was not officially banned by authorities, but it was ideologically condemned. So this means that it wasn't available in any state record stores. You wouldn't find it anywhere official, since all industries were run by the government and they were against rock and roll, and you couldn't find it anywhere legally. The only way you could get access to it was through underground black markets. And this fostered a sort of strange community, because you would have these tight-knit groups of individuals who would all have a love for rock and roll, who would trade records between each other that they got from tourists or their parents who were officials who were able to get records when they went out of the country. So the main way that the rock and roll spread was through samizdat, and samizdat, defined by Anne Komaromi, is the unofficial publishing of media in post-Stalinist Russia, and this applies really to most of Eastern Europe as well. So samizdat was essentially people would make copies of the records and cassettes they owned and then distribute them. And as I mentioned before, this plays in heavily to the communities that were formed, because if you were caught by the authorities, everything you had would be confiscated. All the records you owned, all the cassettes you had, everything. So this led to very small groups who would trade records in between each other, just essentially taking in this Western ideology that comes with rock and roll, as rock and roll is inherently very Western. It's got themes of rebellion, freedom, youth, things that were being intentionally suppressed by many socialist Eastern European regimes. So the real overall impact of this has to do with the ideologies that came in. As I said before, rebellion, freedom, youth, all of these things were suppressed. And another thing was Christianity. That was brought in to Russia exclusively through music, actually, because Russia and many other socialist Eastern European countries had enforced atheism. They didn't want God in their state, and if you were a practitioner of any religion, you could be jailed, fined, all sorts of punishments. But music like Bruce Springsteen would come in, and in particular the musical Jesus Christ Superstar, that introduced a whole host of young Russians to God, Christianity, religion as a whole, and that undermined a lot of what the regimes had built up. Rock and roll essentially weakened the barriers between the Western world and socialist Eastern Europe that all those regimes tried really hard to keep up. To quote Sergei Zuk, rock music did not per se destroy socialism, but it led to the borders between the Western world and socialist Eastern countries kind of weakening. This crossover of culture overall weakened the whole, we are Russia, we are different from all these other countries, and for that we are stronger. So as a whole, I talked about how rock and roll was spread, what its influence was, what exactly its role was. And to quote Chris Bowlby, when music captures the spirit of freedom, no border can stop it. Thank you.